What's up, everybody? It's Dave here with Comics Games Life, and welcome to my review and summary of Punisher: The Bullet That Follows, issue number 1. This was written by David Pepose, art by Dave Wachter, coloring by Dan Brown, and lettering by Corey Pettit. Now, this is a 4-part series, and all 4 parts have already come out. When that's the case, I like to cover the entire story in one video. But the Punisher is a character that's near and dear to my heart. Although this is not Frank Castle, Joe Garrison is kind of like a replacement, or an alternate, I guess. But I wanted to take my time with his story because I wanted to give it a fair look over. So instead of periodically sharing my opinions throughout the story, I'm just going to go ahead and tell the entire story. And if you wanted to hear my opinions about the things that I liked and didn't like, I'm going to save those and do a dedicated video strictly on my thoughts and opinions, and that will be coming out in the very near future. At the start of the story, we're introduced to the Garrison residence, which is currently a crime scene. And passing through the crowd of onlookers is veteran Detective Ward and his partner, Detective Linus. As they start their investigation, they're briefed by the crime scene investigator on site, and they have discovered 3 bodies: Joe Garrison's wife, Stephanie, and their 2 kids, Laura and Danny. As they're sifting through the debris, Detective Linus discerns that this is not a gas leak, which was what was originally thought. And Detective Ward takes a look behind a vent that's attached to a wall that's pretty much untouched by any of the destruction, and he discovers a bomb that had not been detonated. So this case, which was once thought an accident, has now become a homicide. And since the bombs were discovered inside the house, they knew that the person responsible had to have access. And with Joe Garrison, the father and husband of the murdered family, missing, he becomes their prime suspect. Now, while at the Black Dragon Club, the terrorist for hire known as the Sokovian is hiding out there and is under the protection of the Inner Demon Gang. He had hired them for protection due to the cargo that he was carrying, but had he known who was after him, he would have hired a lot more, because that person just walked through the door and announces to everyone in the room that their only chance of leaving here alive is to give him what he wants. And what he wants is the Sokovian, who's responsible for multiple hijackings, kidnappings, and executions, and more recently, the murder of a mother and her 2 children. So the Inner Demons jump into action because they're paid to protect this guy, and there's no way they're gonna back down from one guy who thinks he has the cojones to take them down. But little do they know that this is Joe Garrison. Not only is he on a mission for revenge, but he is a former S.H.I.E.L.D. assassin who has the receipts to back up his threat, which he does by whipping out his 2 high-tech sidearms and starts blasting up the place. And amongst the onslaught, he's able to kill 5 of the 8 inner demons, but one gets close enough to attack him with an electrified katana. But Joe's ballistic armor is able to withstand the blow, and he twists the other end of the blade and stabs the guy with his own weapon. And then the 2 remaining demons shove him through some doors into the kitchen, but during the scuffle, he's able to grab one of them and slams his head against the wall. Now, the last remaining demon happens to be the biggest one of them all, but Joe, being a resourceful guy, grabs a bottle of rum and smacks him over the head with it. But just before the alcohol-drenched demon is about to avenge his fallen brethren, Joe ignites a lighter and throws it at him, and this demon goes up in flames. At this point, Joe leaves the scene because amongst the chaos and confusion, the Sokovian got away. The agency S.H.I.E.L.D. has multiple off-the-books bunkers scattered throughout the city, and Joe Garrison, along with one of his former teammates, AAA, takes one of these sites over to use as their home base. And at this bunker, Garrison and AAA, they're having a discussion about what just happened when a news feed catches their attention. Apparently there was an eyewitness to all the things that happened at the Black Dragon Club, and the eyewitness states that the person shooting up the club looked like they were wearing a symbol of a skull on their chest. So the news anchor reports that the Punisher, aka Frank Castle, may be back, or this may be work of a copycat. And upon hearing this, Garrison curses his ballistic armor because its design does resemble that of the Punisher's symbol. But then AAA brings up some good news and tells Garrison that the ammunition that he had in his weapons at the time of the firefight were Reaper bullets. Now, embedded in these bullets are tracking devices, and this is good news to Garrison because even though the Sokovian got away, he knows he did fire a round into the Sokovian's briefcase. So now that he has a lead on the Sokovian's location, he quickly starts to leave the bunker. But before he goes, AAA stops him, and she asked, "Joe, you retired as the gravedigger of S.H.I.E.L.D. Do you really want to go back to that life?" And he responds coldly, "No, I made her a promise. I'm never going back. All I'm doing is tying up loose ends." And with that being said, off into the night he goes. And as he's making his way to the Sokovian's location, he starts to head down memory lane, where we catch a glimpse of what his life was like shortly after he retired from S.H.I.E.L.D. We see him and his family vacationing at a house on a lake, and his 2 children are playing off in the distance, and he's leaning against a tree sitting next to his wife, and he's having a hard time embracing this moment. And he tells her that everything here is just too perfect, as if somehow this moment isn't real. But then his wife turns to him and tells him some loving words. They embrace, and he tells her he's just blown away by how lucky he is. And ironically, in the next panel, we see that he gets blown away by how unlucky he is, because it shows you what happens just before the explosion at his home. It seems like he's walking up to his house with a bag full of groceries, and the bomb goes off just before he gets to the door. But we're snapped back into the now because Garrison has just reached his destination. So the Sokovian had made his way to a subway station, and as Garrison heads down the stairs to continue his search, he doesn't see the Sokovian anywhere. So he calls up AAA in his earpiece and tells her to feed the subway station's surveillance footage into his smart contact lens. And when she does, he is able to see exactly where the Sokovian went. He made his way down into the lower level using a maintenance tunnel. So as Garrison follows the breadcrumbs, he makes his way down into the tunnel as well. Now these tunnels stretch for miles. So Garrison is just walking and he doesn't see any sign of the Sokovian anywhere. But then one of the subway trains passes by and Garrison notices that the acoustics bouncing off a certain section of the wall sounds a little funny. So he decides to go with this hunch and he places an explosive device there and detonates it. And once the wall has been turned to rubble, what's staring at him from the other side, he was not expecting. Because the Sokovian went to this specific place because he knew he would find reinforcements there. And what he purchased for $10 million worth of mutant growth hormone were the services of Dr. Zabo and his group of mercenaries. And he specifically paid them to hunt down and kill this so-called Punisher. And Dr. Zabo is actually grateful because they don't actually have to go hunt him down because he came to them. And while Zabo is giving his appreciation, Garrison wastes no time and assembles his railgun and fires it into this group of adversaries. Now the railgun's blasts are magnetic, so as it passes by these mercenaries, it actually disarms them all, but also delivers a powerful explosive once it comes in contact with something. So as Garrison is taking down these mercenaries with ease, we see Dr. Zabo untying his tie, getting a little bit more comfortable, and then he begins to transform. And Garrison suddenly becomes aware of this transformation because he starts hearing the grotesque sounds of bones breaking and muscles tearing. And as he looks, what stands before him is no longer Dr. Zabo, but a hulking beast who calls himself Mr. Hyde. Now the character of Mr. Hyde has been in the world of Marvel Comics since the 60s, but this is actually my first time seeing him this monstrous looking. But anyway, Garrison fires his railgun and it does absolutely nothing to Mr. Hyde. And then Mr. Hyde grabs this heavy piece of equipment and Garrison barely dodges out of the way before it comes slamming into the ground. And before he recovers, Mr. Hyde picks up Garrison, but Garrison, quick on the draw, he pulls out an electronic baton and stabs Mr. Hyde in the eye, which stuns him briefly. And Joe, knowing an attack is coming imminently, picks up the Sokovian's metal briefcase and places it in front of his body just before Mr. Hyde punches him through a brick wall. And he lands on top of the subway track. And Mr. Hyde quickly gets on top of him. And insane with anger because he lost his eye, Mr. Hyde tells Garrison that he's gonna eat him alive. But quick on his feet, Garrison grabs a handful of that mutant growth hormone and shoves it down the throat of Mr. Hyde. Now a small amount of this stuff will turn a normal person into a hulking beast, but the copious amount that Mr. Hyde just consumed would kill most of anything. And Mr. Hyde begins to convulse and then falls to the ground. Now he's not actually dead, he's just incapacitated, but having that battle won, Joe looks around and he sees the Sokovian making his way on top of a subway platform where he grabs a woman to take as hostage. Now Garrison jumps up to another subway platform, and just as he does, a subway train passes between them. So you have Garrison on one side of the subway train and the Sokovian and his hostage on the other side. And then you have this train running down the middle. And Garrison knows he cannot let the Sokovian get away, because if he does, he's not going to know who hired him to kill his family. But the only way to stop him is to kill him, and killing him would put him in that same situation. So in that few seconds that the train is passing by, he sees the woman who's being held hostage and he thinks of his wife, and he can't let another innocent person die. So he raises his sidearm and fires an impossible shot, and the bullet sails in between the subway train cars and hits its target, which happens to be between the eyes of the Sokovian. And with Garrison accepting this defeat, he picks up his earpiece that fell out during the struggle, and on the other end he hears AAA yelling for him, asking him if he's okay. He lets her know that he's fine, but the Sokovian is dead and that it's time to go back to work. So that was the end of Punisher issue number 1 of 4, The Bullet That Follows. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I do plan on giving issues 2, 3, and 4 their own individual video as well. But before the video on issue 2 comes out, I will be putting out that video unloading my thoughts, opinions, things I liked, things I didn't like about this issue, and really about the whole idea on this series existing in the first place. So I love, appreciate, and thank you all for watching. Remember to support your local comic and game shops, and I will see you next time.